people have crafted policy for 40 years, and they've got a poor track record of keeping the people in mind as they craft that policy. They think the status and they think the elite special interests, they think about those people above all else, and they continue to build themselves up while suffocating the people. Does this happen in Arkansas? Absolutely. Do people pay attention? No, they don't. Happens in Arkansas, but maybe in slightly different ways. We've got term limits here. I mean, they're much larger since the convicted John Woods got his way. But when state legislators get subjected to the term limits, or when the governor deems them worthy, they get a nice state job, a reward for playing ball, for keeping the status quo going. Who will be the next to get a government job as a reward? Well, that's a good question. We should start a pool. In some cases, the politicians decide to create their own schemes, though, and get their colleagues to play along. Jake Files, John Woods, Mike and Neal, Rusty Cranford, Randall Shelton, Orrin Paris, and more built themselves up a nice little fraud scheme, and thankfully they got caught before they could steal any more of our money, the taxpayers' money. The bottom line is this: we as the people must wake up and pay attention, or else we will not recognize this country or this state that we love so much in 20 years. While we wait to see who else will be indicted or who else is going to plead guilty on corruption right here in Arkansas, let's commit ourselves to telling our family and our...
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Howdy, y'all. How's it going? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us today. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. And we can't do the program without you. Feel free, you can sound off over at facebook.com/Conduit News. Got some good comments already coming in. We also have the text message number. You can call or text 870-275-9799. A couple of things. I've been noticing there's a couple of Facebook posts I've just been, singing. It seems like there's a kind of a reoccurring theme. A lot of people that I'm friends with are talking about kind of big ideas when it comes to how we govern ourselves. And I've noticed some people are asking, can you name three things that you do that the government's not involved in some way, you know what I mean? And it really is interesting. Because I was thinking, well, I pray the government's not involved in that. Although they tried to be. When Obama was in office, you had the IRS. Remember that? Lois Lerner, and they were putting extra hurdles in front of nonprofit applications that were affiliated with limited government-type groups, conservative groups. And there were testimonies in front of Congress about the letters that the IRS was sending these groups because they mentioned that they open with prayer, and the IRS wanted to know the contents of their prayers. And, I mean, that, ladies and gentlemen, in and of itself has so many deep implications because totalitarian governments see themselves as the rule makers, as the supreme, as the sovereign, and they get very intimidated when the people that are supposed to appreciate and be loyal to them
actually believe in something higher and more powerful than they are. It makes the government totalitarian freaks, as Andrew Breitbart called them, totalitarian freaks, very, very nervous. So I got to thinking about this, and then I was like, okay, well, you go to church. Man, we go to church. Well, then you've got the IRS again. What are they doing? They're giving them nonprofit status, and you better not ever engage in any sort of issue speech or political speech, because we might yank that 501c3 status, which I really don't believe is constitutional, by the way. I think if it were ever challenged, especially now, I think you could get a win. The government is worried in many cases about the speech and about people applying in a biblical worldview, Christian context, actual biblical principles to the way we conduct ourselves here in our country. But okay, all that aside, I found this article this morning, as a matter of fact, because I was going through Facebook, and I was seeing people talking about these issues. What is the government? And I found this old speech, and the only reason this was published today over at Zero Hedge, and I had just hearkened and reckoned back to Congressman Ron Paul yesterday, and yet he's in the news today, and I don't believe in coincidences. So I said, you know what? I think the audience in the opening segment maybe needs to hear this. So back in the year 2000, Ron Paul was still, no one had even heard of his son Rand at this point, and Ron was still in Congress, and so he basically gives this speech, and some of these quotes in this speech are great. He says that the Constitution basically was rejected by the United States government. And here's some gems, right? Quote, "Our constitutional republic, according to our founders, should, above all else, protect the rights of the minority against the abuses of an authoritarian majority. They feared democracy as much as monarchy and demanded a weak executive, a restrained court, and a handicapped legislator." Now think about that for a second. A weak executive, a restrained court, and a handicapped legislature. That sounds like a government is it's a very difficult government to get anything done, right? And yet, what do the progressives say? What do the progressives of the Republican Party and the progressives of the Democrat Party say? Well, we've got to be pragmatic to just get things done. Government needs to do the things the government needs to do. And they advance this notion, trying to convince you and really lull the people to sleep by claiming that this is not about politics, that there are certain things the government does that are not about politics. And I reject that. Just like people try to say the courts are nonpartisan. Not anymore, and I don't know if they ever were, but they're certainly not that's why nonpartisan judicial elections don't make any sense to me. There are clearly two ways that you can look at a law. You can either, believe it is what it says, understand the intent, the definitions of words, whether we're looking at 18th century writings or 21st century writings, or you just say, no, it evolves with human nature. Here's another gem from this 2000 speech. "The Constitution made it clear that the government was not to interfere with productive, nonviolent human energy." Think about that for a second. How far we have gone from that idea. The Constitution made it clear that the government was not to interfere with productive, nonviolent human energy. This is the key element that has permitted America's great achievements. It was a great plan. We should all be thankful for the bravery and wisdom of those who established this nation and secured the Constitution for us. We have been the political and economic envy of the world. We have truly been blessed, he said. The founders often spoke of divine providence and that God willed us this great nation. It has been a grand experiment, but it is important that the fundamental moral premises that underpin this nation are understood and maintained. We, as members of Congress, have that responsibility. Wow. Really good stuff here. Goes on, almost every day, activity we engage in is monitored or regulated by some government agency. If one attempts just to avoid government harassment, one finds himself in deep trouble with the law. Paul notes in his speech a contest between people seeking liberty and seeking power. Now, this is where I just thought to myself, wow, how many of our local politicians are seeking liberty or seeking power? How many of our state elected officials are you seeking liberty for the people, or are you seeking power for yourself? Listen to this. In every society, there are always those waiting in the wings for an opportunity to show how brilliant they are as they lust for power, convinced they know what's best for everyone. But the defenders of liberty know that what is best for everyone is to be left alone, with a government limited to stopping aggressive behavior, meaning you can stop aggressive behavior, but that's it. And that is why our whiteboard for the rest of the week, ladies and gentlemen, reads Land of Opportunists. So I can get out of the way. Land of Opportunists is what we've decided here at Conduit News. You know, the motto on the back of your license plate reads the natural state, but it used to read the land of opportunity, didn't it? It used to be the state motto. Before it was the natural state, it was the land of opportunity. And essentially what we have here with the corruption in the state of Arkansas, and we have people trying to do something about it, at least, that's what the headlines tell us. But if you really look at the long view of things, the political elite in this state are opportunists. And this quote right here describes the struggle to a T, a struggle between people seeking liberty versus people who are seeking power. In every society, there are always those waiting in the wings for an opportunity to show how brilliant they are as they lust for power, convinced they know what's best for everyone. But the defenders of liberty know that what is best for everyone is to be left alone, with the government limited to stopping aggressive behavior. We've gotten far past that here in the state of Arkansas, though, haven't we? We're far past that. I mean, we are giving our Arkansas state government a ton of our money, and they use that money to, well, they've laundered it to enrich themselves. And people are pleading guilty, and people are going to jail. But why do they have this opportunity? Well, they have this opportunity because there's so much money to divvy up amongst themselves. If we were to limit or greatly reduce the amount of money going to the government, they would have less of it to steal. If we would greatly reduce the newfound responsibilities and the newfound charters that government creates for itself, and will do it any time you leave them unchecked, once the government claims a new responsibility to take care of this or that or whatever society's ills, whatever the popular thing is of the day, well, they'll create for themselves a new agency, and they will never go away because they never actually solve the problem. And that's an issue. But if you get to the point where, listen, productive nonviolent behavior need to leave people alone, it's also basically called voluntary cooperation among free men in a free market. Again, I wish we would get to a place in society where if you hear of your relative or your cousin or something getting a government job, you don't hear your other family member saying, "Oh, man, He's got a government job. He's got job security. I wish we could get to a place where that was. I wish it was the opposite. I wish if you got a private sector job, right? If you got a private sector job, then people are like, oh, my gosh, he's got job security. Because the market's growing, because government's limited. Government is only increasing in size as the economy grows and there's more commerce and more people and that sort of thing. That's the only way it really grows in proportion, and it doesn't get out of control. But right now, I mean, we live in a world where essentially, you know, if you get that government job, you're set, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. You're set. People are basically impossible to fire. That's not the way it is in the real world, though, in the private sector, and this is what lends the whole disconnect. Politicians often lament, why does it have to be us versus the people? Why does it have to be us versus them? Well, it's your job to disrupt that mentality, but in order to do it, you've got to take real world, everyday principles that most of us live by out here in the real world and try to apply it to the Marble Palace. Try to apply it to the swamp, because there's a bubble down there, and what you guys think makes sense, it's like you're living in another world. It's like you're living in another dimension, you know? But back home, the sky is blue, okay? There are basic things, truths, that you guys seem to ignore, and it's very, very frustrating for most of us. He went on to say, the grand experiment, this is Ron Paul from the year 2000, the grand experiment in human liberty must not be abandoned. A renewed hope and understanding of liberty is what we need as we move into the 21st century. Let's hope and pray that our political focus will soon shift toward preserving liberty and individual responsibility and away from authoritarianism. The future of the American Republic depends on it. Let's not forget the American dream depends on keeping alive the spirit of liberty. Now, I want you to understand something. I want you to think about something, folks. I mean, he said these words back in 2000, and look at what the country has gone through since then. There hasn't been a lot of thought of draining the swamp since he talked about individual rights and a limited government. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but with Donald Trump as president, we are seeing more movement towards draining the swamp and exposing these people for who they are and exposing the system and enforcing the laws that need to be enforced, that are on the books, like a sovereign country securing its sovereign border. It's pretty crazy, but that time from 2000 to now, it's been rough, hasn't it? And we had a Marxist president during that time. If anything, it's encouraging to hear somebody who was right then and is right now. We're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell. Back in just a moment.
Order. In the name of public safety, order. This meeting of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards is called to order in the name of public safety. What's on the agenda for the day?
We have before us today, per our summons, a representative from the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing cosmetology, cosmetologist, and all things hair care and beauty.
Right. Of course, I remember this. In the name of public safety, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and thank you for appearing before us today.
Yes, my name is Cosmo Glamour Gazette, and I'm here in response to a letter our state board received claiming we're in violation of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards. In the letter, you claim that our licensing board is in violation of your rules and regulations because we have failed to, quote, pay tribute, end quote, and therefore have not been granted a license by the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing licensing boards to, quote, shake down the Arkansans who have an interest in cosmetology, end quote.
In the name of public safety, order. Yes, Miss Gazette, we sent you that letter because you have not obtained our approval in the form of a license from our board to distribute licenses to the professional class your board strives to protect. In the name of public safety, of course.
Of course.
So, in the name of public safety, and just so we can get this for the record, you do admit and agree with our board, the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards, that you have not obtained a license, thereby revealing your board of cosmetology to be operating outside our rules, regulations, and authority?
Well, sir, I'm not sure our board agrees that we need a license from your board to continue to shake down, to look out for the public safety of Arkansans.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Well, it seems we are at a bit of an impasse if we are not in agreement that your board owes us tribute.
Sir, maybe we could ask and see if there's a bureaucrat in the house.
Ah, yes. Yes, that would shed some light on things. A bureaucrat. Yeah, in the name of public safety, is there a bureaucrat in the house? We need someone to resuscitate and confirm our authority as the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards.
Here.
Ah, yes. Oh, good. Come to the end of the table in the name of public safety and state your name for the record, please.
Yes, I am Despot Ringleader, the head of the bureau governing all state bureaus, and it is my testimony the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards does have the authority to demand tribute in this situation and will provide in exchange a license to say they can continue to operate in the name of public safety.
It's hard to argue when the public safety is put at risk. Very well. We will consider Mrs. Ringleader's testimony as truth, and we will pay tribute in the name of public safety, of course.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I'm told that there is some pushback out there from people who are in elected office who don't like the concept of term limits. I find your lack of faith disturbing. No, you know what, folks? And this is honest. I don't care. There's some politicians that maybe feel differently about term limits that I might agree with on other issues, but this is what I'm talking about. This is the disconnect. It is delusional to think at this point that the good guys who could stay in office forever or whatever are going to check the majority of people, and you just fundamentally, in my opinion, you're really misunderstanding human nature and what we're capable of. Yes, you can be good, you can be above the fray, but I'm sorry, most of the people that get in leadership are not, or they turn a blind eye to it. That's why we have the situation we do. And to think that there aren't other people that can come after you is ridiculous, okay? I'm done with this whole idea. Listen, if you're in elected office and you're not for term limits, should we really be surprised? Is anyone really surprised that you're a politician in elected office and you're not for putting the term limits back on the ballot. Okay? And I don't even want to get into the arguments pro and con and anything else, or the bureaucrats are going to run things. I'm not even going to get into the arguments with you, because I have seen, as part of a long view, I know the 4th of July is coming up, but a long train of abuses and usurpations. I know how you guys use the system, and it may not be you, and you might, yes, you may be the one that needs to be allowed to stay in office forever because you are able to maneuver and do things and be good and stand up for the people, and that's great. But I am willing to sacrifice that possibility because I know how bad the other guys are and how they will use it. They will use that. You would attempt to use it for good, right? But through these other people, you wield this power that is really a net negative. I think the people, without strict term limits, I think the people lose in the long run. It is a net loss for the people of Arkansas, and that's where I am. Folks, don't be upset if a politician that you like or that you agree with on most things is not for the term limits. Don't be surprised. This is part of the Marble Palace bubble I'm telling you about. Instead, we're going to have Tim Jacob on next hour again. Back in a minute.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. So, I guess last week we covered the story about how the Attorney General responded to a request for an opinion on whether or not there is a penalty for carrying a concealed handgun without a license. There was a letter written some 6 months ago by Senator Linda Collins Smith asking the Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, if she could, focus solely on the question in the law, is there a penalty for carrying a weapon without a permit? And the Attorney General responded finally last week. Here with reaction, we have Senator Linda Collins Smith on the line. Linda, welcome back to the program, and good morning to you.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing, Paul?
I am doing well. I'm doing very well. I first of all, just want to say that I really appreciate you asking for this opinion some 6 months ago, because I think everybody knows that you were trying to get the government to acknowledge the Second Amendment freedoms that we have, basically a decriminalization of possession of a weapon here in the state of Arkansas. So I thank you so much for that, Senator Linda Collins Smith.
Thank you very much. I had to chuckle there and laugh. That 6 months ago, I sure did. And I appreciate that. I can tell you that's probably the most, on Facebook and social media of all kinds that I've and probably called about, and people that have ran into me have probably asked me about that opinion more than anything that I have talked about. Has she answered that question yet? And they really want to know. Mm-hmm. And, of course, she had not. And I even felt like that I had, I called it protected the Attorney General and tried to make sure that people were respectful. As I requested the opinion, I have a job to do, and so does the General. As a legislator, I understand that we get very busy, and I know that she has had a lot of things that she's worked on out of state. Multiple times we, had, the death penalty issues going.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, I just, again, I'm just going to reiterate something. We shouldn't be surprised if people want to stay in office longer and they happen to already be in office. That's not a surprise, and they may be great guys. They may have great voting records. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, it's a net negative. If you look at it, it's a net negative to not have the term limits the way they were in Arkansas. The people of Arkansas deserve to get rid of the, stain that we have been wounded by a convicted felon. When it comes to this term limits issue, you have to understand something. The reason Arkansas term limits exists to get this back on the ballot for a vote is because we have been wounded by a convicted felon. And the Arkansas legislature, many of them were complicit in an ethics amendment that was written so deceptively. I'm talking about Senator John Woods, who is now convicted of laundering money through a Christian college to enrich himself. And everybody knew he was doing it. Everybody knew he had carved out a financial niche for himself. Right, I mean, he was living the lifestyle of the rich and famous with his fully furnished Little Rock apartment with autographed photos of Michael Jordan and baseball bats with Pete Rose's signature on them. Living the high life, this guy. This is from court testimony, by the way. This is what enticed Mike and Neil to ask, I wonder what he's doing to make extra money on the side. And then, of course, Mike and Neil pled guilty. State Representative Mike and Neil pled guilty, and that's what exposed John Woods. He rolled on him. All right, so we are wounded by a convicted felon because it's no surprise. If you go back and you read issue 3 of 2014, if you go back and you read this thing, folks, it is obvious that John Woods was trying to deceive the public to increase the pay for current legislators, and they get to set their own pay. Well, it's a citizen commission that you guys appoint. So it's you guys. And by the way, you just keep recommending the increase. So we know and then it said that you were setting term limits in the amendment, which you were really setting new term limits that were allowing people to stay in office much longer. So it was deceptive on all fronts. And are we really surprised that the guy that wrote it, the guy that pushed it, the guy that was trying to make more money was also the guy that was laundering taxpayer dollars through a Christian college to get kickbacks for himself? Are we really surprised by that? That's why this term limits movement is such a big deal, because it really could provide at least some symbolic relief trying to get rid of the stain of Senator John Woods and what he did to this state, not just to the people of District 7, which is his district, or was his district, but to the people of this entire state, to the culture of corruption that he fits so well into down there at the Marble Palace. So, number one, it could be a symbolic, victory. But number two, it would also, guess what? It would also require that some of these legislators can't stay down there as long. And, yeah, that's going to mean some of the good guys have got to go home. At this point, I think high turnover is a good thing. I really do. And at some point, you're going to have people that realize their time down there is limited. It's not about making friends. It's about doing the will of the people. And I'm sorry, I refuse to believe. And I know they can put you in a box, and I know they can, compartmentalize you, and they can marginalize you and everything like that. But if everybody's subject to these term limits, maybe people will start to move a little faster and actually start to kind of put their elbows out a little bit more. Put their elbows out a little bit. Legislating is not a hard thing, okay? They want you to act like it's complicated, but if you can do your own taxes, you can essentially, this is to business owners. If you can figure out how to run a business, you can figure out how the legislature works and how to be an effective one in a small amount of time. So I think we're setting the bar a little low I think that's part of the problem as well. We're setting the bar. Well, Paul, you just don't understand. You haven't been down there. I've been down there enough to see you guys in action. And, you know, yeah, I know hindsight's 20/20, but sometimes I'm like, well, why didn't he say this? Why didn't he say that? Anyway, the phone number is 870-275-9799. You can call or text that number, 870-275-9799. Over the weekend, and we didn't get to this story yesterday, but Michael Wickline wrote a follow-up piece about raising the cigarette tax, the study of raising your taxes on cigarettes. Well, you know, we want to discourage smoking, right? Going back to our first segment, of course, that's one of the things. You know, we want to discourage smoking. Of course, that's one of the roles of government. Of course it is. Raising cigarette tax goes on state task force lists. And we see here, because there was some confusion, are they proposing to raise the state tax $1.50? No, they're not proposing to raise it $1.50. They did, I believe, propose it. They did propose to raise it up to $1.50 from $1.15. But in reality, what we find now is that they're proposing to study raising it from $1.15, 15 cents to $1.30. Okay. Now, lawmakers also proposed the possibility of imposing an excise tax on e-cigarettes, which are subject to sales taxes but not any tobacco-specific levies. All right? So that's something else that they want to try. They are looking for revenue anywhere they can. Now, I know what you're thinking. Paul, this is an example. I'm trying to set up a good straw man here. I know what you're thinking. Paul, this is an example of the government that we voted for. Yes, I know. Because everybody, I mean, do you remember when the Tea Party was formed? Do you remember this? Specifically in Arkansas, all these rallies, and you had some conservative groups that are really, you don't really even hear about them much anymore. Yeah, you had these conservative groups that were essentially at these rallies, putting these rallies on. People were showing up, and the people had these signs saying, raise our cigarette taxes. Do you remember this? I mean, what a mandate. Isn't it great to see the task force work on what is a mandate from the people, raising our cigarette taxes 15 cents? Isn't that what we all went to the ballot box for these last 10 years? These last 10 years voting for Republicans in the state of Arkansas? We all went because we were tired of cigarette taxes. We were tired of cigarettes being so cheap, and we wanted to pay more. Quote, the co-chairman of the task force, Senator Jim Hendren, says, I want to be clear that this is not a recommendation of the task force. This is not a proposal. This is simply a member wanting more information of consideration about some possible change. So he wants to be clear here. Now, why does Senator Hendren want to be clear? This isn't a recommendation of the task force. This is just a study that some member wants more information about. Well, it's because if it's an actual recommendation, I think there's more, because this is about taxes, I think there is more scrutiny on this task force than there was on the Medicaid task force. And because it's taxes and it hits people right in their wallets, it has an immediate effect on them. I think there's more attention being paid to this thing than they ever thought would be. Now, a lot of that is we need to be thankful that Jan Morgan ran, because if Jan Morgan hadn't primaried Asa Hutchinson, they'd be about to raise the grocery tax. And then they'd be setting up a welfare program for the poor, an earned income tax credit, which is a welfare program. Now, I don't know. I still think they may set up some sort of earned income tax credit because that's what the Democrats tried to pass last time. I hope not. I am going to be very frustrated if the Republican majority goes for this earned income tax credit idea. I'm telling you that it's a possibility. Don't think that it's not. I mean, their little liberal consultant they hired and fired, Randy Bauer, he was a fan of it. But Jim Hendren is clear here. This is not a recommendation of the task force. This is just a study getting more information to a member or member that want to know how much money would we get if we raise your cigarette taxes. And the reason he's making that clarification is because he does not want a frenzy. He does not want the governor to have to come out. Now, keep in mind, the governor does have a Democrat opponent in Jared Henderson. I mean, I know they're buddies, and Asa gave him $2 million. But still, I mean, for the sake of theater, you never know. He may want to try to actually make a legitimate run at this thing, and he might get Asa to come out and say, I mean, can you imagine if the Democrat candidate Jared Henderson today, can you imagine if the Democrat candidate Jared Henderson today called a press conference and said he opposes raising your taxes on cigarettes? Hey, there's a lot of smokers in Arkansas compared to other states. You might get some votes that way. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine? This task force, man, if they keep coming out with these recommendations and they're talking about raising taxes on this group of people over here, we promise we'll lower them over here, though. But you still have this group of people that's now paying more than they were on a product that they're addicted to. Okay, let's be clear. You're raising taxes on people who are addicted to the product. So we know you're getting the money. I mean, you know that there's going to be a real effective way to predict how much revenue this is going to increase. I mean, you could take that. That would be the liberal line, by the way. Jared Henderson, Democrat candidate for governor, he could hold a press conference today, and he could go out there and he could say, addiction in this state is a big deal, and addicts, nicotine addicts, don't need to be marginalized. They don't need to be forgotten about, and they don't need to be exploited. Don't raise the cigarette tax, Asa. Don't raise the cigarette tax, Jim. I mean, it could happen today. It would be a pretty, it'd be a pretty dope political strategy. All right, the 16-member task force. Let's see. Do we have any more updates? I know this was written over the weekend. Oh, yeah, this all happened. Just to remind you, you had Michael Keck. He played the emotional argument, the pain point politics argument that I was just setting up for Jared Henderson. He played the opposite. Michael Keck is from the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network. He was the one that suggested raising the taxes on this, okay, because it's, to fight cancer. So he was taking the pain point politics the other direction. The current tax of $1.15 per pack raises $165 million in general revenue and $5.3 million in special revenue. Now, folks, so if you could take that and raise that, 15 cents a pack, you're talking about some real money here that they can use to spend. Now, they're going to say, no, Paul, we're promised we're going to lower the taxes over here. Again, the definition of a tax increase, we can't agree on. We can't agree on what the definition of a tax cut is. So it talks about, let's see, who all wanted this? Senator Dave Wallace wants more information about imposing an excise tax on electronic cigarettes, the Gazette reports, while Representatives Francis Kavanaugh, Matt Pitch, and Senator Missy Irvin want information on options that for that possible excise tax. According to the General Assembly's website, Wallace also intends to review increasing the excise taxes on beer and wine and the soda tax. Representative Bob Johnson, a Democrat from Jacksonville, aims to review imposing a special sales tax on alcohol or cigarettes, according to the General Assembly's websites. So here we go. This is what they want to. This is what they want to discuss. They want to raise taxes on wine and beer and soda. If they raise the taxes on soda higher than what the grocery tax is, then, I mean, how do you avoid a Michael Bloomberg comparison? As far as I'm concerned, on this program, you're not going to avoid it. Why? Well, it's sugar, and we can't let people have sugar without paying the government a little bit more. 64-ounce sodas and diabetes and healthcare costs, because we're all socialists now, and you are born responsible for your fellow baby over there in the incubator. You're responsible for his health care, so we can't let you have bacon. You don't need to have bacon or donuts. You don't need to have those things. This is the part where it all really starts to get real for people, but they're going to do it gradually. Government grows and interferes in our lives psychologically. There's a psychological component to it, and it's gradual. If the stuff going on now, if you took 18, 19-year-old World War II veterans that had come home and just dropped them into our society now, let me tell you something. Our government would change overnight, because if you look at how they used to handle disputes, I mean, they wouldn't tolerate what's going on now. So there's a psychological gradualness, if that's a word, for how government grows, and then they barely they get the toe right over the line, then they redraw the line, and you don't really realize how bad it is. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man, you got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good.
Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, can we take a look at this? I'm telling you, the term limits, people are, these politicians, again, it's no surprise, you're a politician, you don't like term limits, I got it. You might have a great voting record, too, you might have done some great things, I got it. I'm sorry, I think we are at the point where we're done. We're done trying to play this game where, well, the good guys need to stay in office for just as long as the bad guys. I think that's, there's a reason that Asa Hutchinson can't run for a third term. I think we need to have term limits in the legislature. This is obvious at this point, to me anyway. Are there arguments you can make against term limits? Sure, there are. I reject them. Here's a flashback article from 2014. Conduit for action, Conduit right again. I mean, it's how many times does this have to happen? You got to be, ahead of the curve. It's just, so redundant. 16-year term limits proposal actually gives senators 18 to 22 years. That's right. This was on the ballot in 2015 or 2014. The article focuses only on, the length of term limits for the senators. It's understood to allow persons to serve 16 years in the Arkansas House of Representatives, the Arkansas Senate, or a combination of service in both. Reread the last sentence again, and then answer this question. How many years of consecutive service may a state senator serve under this proposal? If you answer 16, then you're wrong. Under the proposed constitutional amendment that is now law, okay, consecutive Senate service will never be limited to 16 years. For a senator serving only in the Senate, at least 18 years of service is allowed under the proposal, and the senator might be allowed 20 to 22 years before he or she is term limited out. How is that possible? You don't have to use Common Core math to come up with this answer. Regular math works just fine. 18 years is the actual minimum in the Senate because 2-year terms do not count. Under H.J.R. 1009, every senator will be eligible for at least one term of 2 years because of reapportionment. The senator could have as many as 3 terms of 2 years if he or she also draws a 2-year term after reapportionment. Why are there 2-year terms in the Senate? The Senate is reapportioned every 10 years, and in the 10-year reapportionment cycle, there will be 2 terms of 4 years and 1 term of 2 years. And terms of senator must be staggered so that not all senators' terms end at the same time except prior to reapportionment. This means that after reapportionment, senators draw for terms so that approximately half receive a 4-year term and approximately half receive a 2-year term. And so here are 3 examples of how reapportionment and drawing for a 2-year or 4-year term allows a senator to have at least 18 years of service. Again, 2-year terms do not count. So you could have at least 18 years, not the 16 years like the law prescribes. And if you don't think these guys know this, I'm just going to say, you see this graph right here? If you don't think you're in office and you don't know this, of course you know this. I mean, you know, they probably have a tattoo of it somewhere. Anyway, that's the way it can go. And so right here you see a total service of 18 years, but I thought it said 16 years. Here you see have the total service of 20 years for an example 2. And example 3, you could get as many as 22 years of total service. Now think about that. A senator who first served a term in the House of Representatives may also end up serving more than 16 years combined service, in part because of a provision that says if your term limit occurs during a term, you may serve to the end of the term. And here's one final wrinkle. Partial terms served as a result of filling a vacancy do not count as well. So a senator who fills a vacancy could serve almost another 4 years in the Senate. Anyway, just some food for thought about what the realities can be when you torture the numbers. We've got one more hour coming your way next. Got a small business spotlight coming your way at 7:33. Don't go anywhere.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Went on and some serious things, so I have worked very hard to make sure that people were respectful, and I really wanted to give benefit of the doubt in whether or not that opinion would come out for the primaries. And of course it did not. Mm-hmm. And so it was very frustrating and very hard to continue to stand up and have hope that she would go ahead and come out. You know, it's very hard to continue to stand up for that.
Let's take the beginning of this. This is the beginning of her opinion, and I'll get you to respond. She writes, you have requested my opinion as to whether there is a provision of Arkansas law that expressly provides a penalty for carrying a concealed handgun without a license. There is no such provision. Now, Linda, I'd be great if the opinion just ended right there. But it doesn't.
That was enough.
What's your reaction to that first sentence?
Well, after reading that, when I first opened that opinion, and I have to say this, I need the time to say it to everyone that's listening. After reading that opinion, and I saw and read a little farther, I had to shut that computer off. I had to turn it off. I couldn't read the rest of it. I could not believe that was the response that I got. I could believe I might get something else, but not that response. Mm-hmm. I absolutely was, I don't think frustrated, maybe sick, but frustrated might be the answer, but I had to wait a little bit to reread it after waiting that many months to get the response that I got. I couldn't believe she was joining the governor in her confusion in the response. So that being said, the first sentence is, and maybe the second one where it says there is no provision, should have been enough. And that would have answered my question and made it very clear. Her confusion is certainly something I didn't expect.
Yeah, because, she goes on to really muddy the water. She says it's not clear whether carrying a concealed handgun without a license will expose a citizen to conviction for the offense of carrying a weapon. She goes on to argue that a prosecutor might say that carrying a concealed handgun without a license may be construed as an attempt to unlawfully employ it against another person. So there is and that to me is so contrived. I mean, there's a reason prosecutors across this state won't prosecute anybody that's falsely arrested on this thing, and everybody knows it. But to admit that fact would devastate the Arkansas State Police budget, is what I think she's protecting.
Well, that right there is probably. I think that the general might want to. I might want to send this back. Of course, that's probably my plan. I have to give you and her a heads up this morning, because the prosecutors, if that were the case, and I'll have to tell you, I remember when the governor sent his letter to the colonel of the state police, Colonel Bryant. You know, Colonel Bryant can read the law, and the state police have not had a problem. And I was embarrassed, I have to tell you. I have to say this, and I have to say to the general, I have to tie these two things together right now, because I'm disappointed that she's so confused, because you see, the colonel can read and they understand the law. We've not had a problem with the state police wrongfully out there going and arresting people, and we've not had prosecutors wrongfully prosecuting people, and they don't have a problem from county to county misinterpreting the laws either. And if we were having such a problem with them misunderstanding the laws, and see, the legislators have this law just like we have wanted it, we do not have a problem with this in the Constitution. I think we've got these laws just like we like it. But because the governor has a problem now with his confusion, and he's sent out a letter to Colonel Bryant and is confusing the people more, and now we get this letter back from the AG, I can tell you very clearly, the prosecutors that we contacted a few years ago and asked the prosecutors would they arrest.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, 870-275-9799. That is the telephone number. If you want to call us or text us this morning, Joe is standing by, ready to take your calls. Yes, he is. He's sitting by. He's not standing by, he's sitting by. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. We're broadcasting across multiple stations in Arkansas, as well as multiple digital platforms, Facebook, live stream, and the YouTube channel. I would ask you, if you get time today, if you're in your car and you want to catch up on maybe the first hour, you can go to our YouTube page, Conduit News, and check out, watch the program at your desk. Well, you know, hopefully, I'm not encouraging you to, like, you know, a lot of times you got to click that minimize button when the boss comes over, especially if your boss is like a Democrat or something. Then that's really going to be a problem. But, I have faith you guys can do it. Or as a moderate, yeah. Yeah. But while you're at the YouTube channel, Conduit News, please subscribe to it so you get our smaller videos, and click the little bell to receive notifications when we do upload. We would greatly appreciate that. All right. I want to start this hour talking about Judge Wendell Griffin. Judge Wendell Griffin is fast becoming a thorn in the side of both the executive branch and the legislative branch. There's talk of impeachment coming up next year. I think Judge Wendell Griffin and Senator Trent Gardner are going to have well, not a literal prize fight, but, you know, just basically an allegorical one, if that's possible. It's Senator Trent Gardner, no fan of Wendell Griffin, but I can't imagine that the governor's office is much of a fan of Wendell Griffin at this point either. But I will say that this article about the Department of Human Services, Asa Hutchinson's Department of Human Services, not complying with Judge Wendell Griffin's order, and Wendell Griffin absolutely laying the smackdown on them. And it does seem that it does seem legitimate to me. If I'm just looking at this, this has to do with nurses actually doing an independent assessment of people who need a special care, at-home care, who are disabled under Medicaid. That's what this case has to do with. And the nurses used to do, the way I understand this, and I'm not an expert, but the way I understand this is the nurses used to go in and they would do the assessment, and they would determine, if you need care, how much care you need, that sort of thing. Apparently, they're moving away from that model and instead using some sort of algorithm. Now, if that sounds it sounds kind of like something off of The Island, it's because it probably is, because what? I mean, we're all socialists now, right? Socialized medicine and everything. And, but it really is disturbing. It's, going from like the nurses evaluating versus an algorithm sounds kind of cold and not compassionate, and really detaches itself from the concept of health care, if you really want to be honest about it. Joe, if you could throw this article up there. Andy Davis says that as punishment for its willful defiance, and that is in the court order, willful defiance, a judge on Monday ordered the Arkansas Department of Human Services to publish statistics on its website related to its failures in assessing needs of disabled Medicaid recipients. Pulaski County Circuit Judge Wendell Griffin also referred two department attorneys and a top agency official to the Supreme Court Committee on Professional Conduct for a determination on whether they are competent to continue representing the agency. I'm telling you, Judge Wendell Griffin here was mad that they haven't been doing this. So the department enacted an emergency rule back in May, allowing it to continue using an algorithm to allocate hours of home-based care to the 8,800 people served by AR Choices. R Choices. Choice would be the thing that they're missing here. Now, what's interesting here is I saw a headline a couple of weeks ago where the DHS, and I thought it was odd at the time, somehow the DHS here in Arkansas got the federal government to write them a letter saying that nurses can't do the assessments, that you have to use the algorithm or you're not in line with the federal government. And it really was an odd, it was like the federal government was just kind of doing a pony show or jumping through the hoops, I guess trying to compete with this order. But see, apparently they haven't done what Wendell Griffin told them to do initially. He had barred the department from using the algorithm until rules authorizing its use had been properly promulgated. Department attorneys argued that they didn't know what that meant. They didn't know what properly promulgated meant. They didn't know. The Administrative Procedures Act allows such rules to be enacted without public notice in response to an imminent peril to the public health, safety, or welfare. So this is what he says. He says that the DHS's attorneys' assertions are, quote, manifestly preposterous. Quote, to accept the claim that DHS is or has been confused about what properly promulgated means, as that term appears in the permanent injunction, requires that one ascribe to learned counsel for DHS, Richard Rosen, and Chief Counsel David Sterling, a degree of legal imbecility this court does not endorse. The court rejects the idea that DHS leaders and its legal counsel are imbeciles. However, because DHS strangely claims through legal counsel to have been confused about the obligation to satisfy the notice and public comment requirements for rulemaking prescribed in the Administrative Procedures Act, the court will refer Rosing Sterling and Division of Aging Adult and Behavioral Health Services Deputy Director Mark White to the Supreme Court Committee on Professional Conduct, as that body is tasked with investigating and determining whether the knowledge, competence, and conduct of lawyers meets the ethical standards of the legal profession in Arkansas found in the Arkansas Code of Professional Conduct. End quote. Yes, that is the same David Sterling who's running for Supreme Court justice seat against Courtney Goodson. That just wanted to make that clear. Now, Griffin suspended the emergency rule on May 21st, Andy Davis writes. In his order on Monday, he chastised the department because they haven't been doing, they have like stopped taking new applications for people who are medically disabled and need the service. Jonesboro-based Legal Aid of Arkansas, which filed the suit that led to these orders from Judge Wendell Griffin in the first place, argues that the department can allow its nurses to use their discretion in awarding hours, as they did before the department began using a cool, calculated algorithm in 2016. The department says the use of the algorithm, which assigns recipients to resource utilization groups based on their answers to questions about their needs. So instead of the nurses going up there, it's essentially a standardized test. Great. Fantastic. Just fill in the bubbles, and we'll get back to you. Go away, kid. You're bothering me. An official with the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services sided with the department on that view in an email to the department on June 12th. It was back on June 12th. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It was a very weird story. I didn't cover it, but I thought it seems like they're just kind of jumping through the hoops here. Listen to this. They have a backlog of 1,116 applications that have not been processed and 1,377 program participants who are overdue for evaluations. So essentially, they've just stopped. And Griffin, according to Andy Davis, called the department's claim that it can't allow nurses to use discretion in awarding hours, quote, the latest example of DHS defiance of the May 14th court order. It's callous disregard. I like how you use the word callous because I feel like going from personal health care to an algorithm and questionnaire is pretty callous and impersonal. Don't you? He says it's callous disregard for the rule of law and its calculated disingenuous representations to this court, the disabled community, it is legally obligated to serve in the general public. Wow. I'm telling you, there's some interesting stuff here. And then he ordered this. Oh, this is what I love this. This is the best part of the order. He orders DHS to publish their failures on their website and continue to publish them for the public to see. He ordered the department to publish on its website within 5 days the number of people who were assessed or reassessed by its nurses each month before 2016, meaning how good how well everything was working when it had a personal touch, okay, versus the number it has failed or refused to reassess each month since February 2017, when Griffin issued a temporary order barring the department from reducing the care hours allotted to 7 recipients named as plaintiffs in the suit. So they've got, I think this is great. I mean, this is great. I wish the legislature would treat these bureaucracies the way Wendell Griffin treats them. Let me say that again. I wish the legislature would treat these bureaucracies the way a judge is treating them. And I wish you guys, would get in there and be like, oh, you failed miserably? We're going to need you to post those failures on your website so everybody can see them. We're going to need you to post those numbers on the front page of the website. And you need I wish you could say the things DHS failed the taxpayers on, and then just list and admit your failures. When's the last time you've ever seen a government agency have to do that? They're telling you it's very refreshing to me. I know people have, they don't agree with Wendell. I disagree with Wendell Griffin when he, went out there and did the death penalty protest, and they get totally broke with the decorum and of what he's supposed to do. But on this, I'm telling you, this is an example of separation of powers, separate but equal branches of government, and this is a smackdown from Wendell Griffin in the judicial branch on the executive branch and Asa Hutchinson's DHS. He ordered the department to publish on his website. He also ordered the department to update the information each month, meaning, by the way, let us know what changes in these failures each month. He said the department must also provide him and legal aid attorney Kevin DeLibon with the names and contact information of each person it has failed or refused to reassess since January 2016 and update that information each month. DeLibon, the attorney, said he's, quote, thankful the judge recognizes DHS's pattern of dishonesty in this case and the harm that DHS is causing to people that it's supposed to serve. He ruled that DHS was being willfully disobedient of his order, and that's what's most important to us, he said, the attorney representing the plaintiffs in this lawsuit. Man, I mean, he is Wendell Griffin is a thorn in the side of the marijuana issue, and he's a thorn in the side here. I'm telling you. But he does make a lot of sense. Wouldn't you love these bureaucracies to have to continue to post when they fail us? I mean, what comes out in some of these committee meetings is ridiculous. The failures, the misuse of money, the incompetence, and it would be great if there was some sort of mechanism to where the legislature and committees could say, I'm going to need you to post that on your website or pass a law giving them some authority. I don't know. It would be pretty good. All right, folks, we've got to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the 10 Commandments, the monument on the Marble Palace grounds, and the 2 lawsuits that have now been merged into one, trying to say that it violates the First Amendment. It doesn't, but that's what they're alleging. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Who's next to zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat-shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, so speaking of judges, we have another judge in the news, and she has Christine Baker, Judge Christine Baker of U.S. District Court, agreed to merge two federal lawsuits. They were filed back on May the 23rd. These are claiming that the Ten Commandments monument, the historical Ten Commandments monument that's on the ground of the Capitol, that was put there because lawmaker sponsored the legislation. I believe it was Senator Rapert. Other people sponsored it, I think, I'm assuming, but it went through committee. It went through a chamber of the legislature. It went through another committee, went through another chamber of the legislature. Then it became law. And they erected the statues. Then some maniac ran it over with his car. Then he got acquitted for some reason, because he's insane, after he had already done it previously in Oklahoma in their monument. Weird. Now it's back up. Okay, they've done it again. They've got these concrete barriers around it. And now there's a lawsuit. Of course, they're claiming, the plaintiffs, that their agnosticism is not a worldview that would impose their unbelief. And agnosticism basically believes that there's no way to know of any divine revelation from God. And I'm like, creation itself? Hello? There's no way to know. Well, I mean, the Bible says nature itself. But anyway, that's my worldview. And these bikers, do you know that that's who's actually suing? They're bikers. This is how they're trying to show cause, or they're trying to show harm, is that they're bikers that bike by the Capitol building. They say every morning, Donna Cave, Judith Lansky, Pat Piazza, and Susan Russell are members of a walking and cycling club who say one of their regular routes takes them past the site where the monument sits between the Capitol and the Justice Building, where they cannot avoid seeing the 6-foot-tall granite monolith that offends them. It offends them verily. It offends them so much that they just can't bring themselves, I'm assuming, to cycle there anymore. Cave is a retired teacher who is agnostic. Lansky is a retired federal judicial law clerk who is Jewish and an atheist. Well, what does that matter? Why do you have to point out that they're Jewish if she's an atheist? Am I the only one that? Oh, because you can be Jewish and an atheist. I mean, I know you can be. That, what a shame that is, by the way. Piazza, a retired social worker, is agnostic. By the way, the Jewish thing, though, you should have no problem with the Ten Commandments. Do what? I'm sorry, I keep coming back. I feel that's interesting. Why not just a law clerk who is an atheist? Why does she got to be a Jewish atheist? Unless, of course, we're trying to promote the idea. Yeah, well, anyway. A retired social worker is agnostic, and Russell is a state research associate who's agnostic. So we've got 1, 2, let's see. Yeah, so 3 agnostics and an atheist walk into a bar. And yeah, that wouldn't that be a great conversation to listen to? Not listen. listen to an agnostic and an atheist go back and forth. Like, no, there actually is no God. The agnostic is like, well, no, there's just no way to know one way or the other. So Joe is cracking some good jokes over here that he's not putting on the air, so that's why I'm laughing. You have to forgive me. So here's the thing, all right? And this is what we've got. I hope we get to this place. I hope this goes all the way to the Supreme Court. I really do. I'm worried about how they would rule, but I mean, I hope it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm ready to correct this concept that people have a right to not be offended, number one, and really the perverse way of them interpreting what religious freedom is these days. For some reason, in secular society, if you say you're agnostic or an atheist, you're automatically favored. You're automatically thought to be smarter than everybody else. But they refuse to believe or put out there that being an agnostic or being an atheist is a worldview that can also affect people in the same way they claim Christians or the Ten Commandments are affecting them. They refuse to admit that. Unbelief is a worldview. Belief is also a worldview. And if putting up a statue, so if putting up a monument affects them in a negative way, can their unbelief and wanting to take it down affect me in a negative way? And the answer is yes. And that is why that is why freedom is the most important thing here. And I'm at a time where I'd keep going. I'm sorry, I'm up against a hard break.
People, it was very clear. I can tell you what my prosecutor said. We were around during the time this law changed. We know the intent of the laws, and it'd basically be foolish if they did that, and they can read it.
Yeah.
So why is our AP having a problem?
I don't know, and that brings me to my next conclusion. A couple of times in this letter, she says that that legislative clarification is certainly warranted, and that's very scary to me because she is essentially giving the legislature a softball and to try to step up and try to correct something that doesn't need correcting. It just needs people to admit what the law is, and that's what's frustrating because...
Wait, Paul.
Go ahead.
I have to correct you there. She's the Attorney General. She's not a legislator. She's not a lawmaker. And we are the lawmakers. And so since she has put a personal opinion there, and that's not a legal opinion, that's not the law. And that is not I think that should have been left out of her legal opinion, and that it was very clear the first parts of that letter was the answer to the question. If there was if we have had an issue of wrongful arrest, then we would be seeing some, or if we saw problems in those arrests, if we started seeing issues, then we would have some actual case laws there that we could use for, something she could cite. She doesn't have that. And she didn't do that. So I have to correct
No, I appreciate that. Yeah,
she doesn't have that.
Yeah, her saying legislative clarification is needed is an opinion that is separate from any analysis of what the statute is saying here. It's deviating from what your original question was. But my fear is, Linda, we're talking with Senator Linda Collins Smith, is that this is now opening a Pandora's box. I don't trust especially after last session with what happened with the enhanced carry bill and how that turned into just absolutely more regulations and more red tape, more money to the government to exercise their Second Amendment rights. If they try to clarify Act 746 or the code that allows people now to open carry, and now we have people admitting that there is no penalty for carrying a weapon without a permission slip from the government, if they try to clarify it, they're going to strip us of our rights. That's the only way they can go. To clarify it would be to strip us of our Second Amendment rights in the current law. Do you agree?
I agree.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right. I got one Facebook commenter says that they need to build a crying room next to the Ten Commandments. Then they would have a place to rest and cry. A wailing wall? Is that what you said, Joe? Yeah, no, they should build a crying room so the cyclists can weep about it. I know, wailing wall. I know, it's fun. It's funny. It's good. It's good. Hey, folks, well, we have these things called small business spotlights. We want to highlight Arkansas business owners who take risks, who invest, and who know a thing or two about creating jobs. They are the backbone of our economy, and most of the time our government treats them like they are really just this endless cash cow and can be manipulated by a lot of politicians who can't create for themselves. So they take from Arkansas small business owners. We want to highlight that. I want to welcome to the program. We have Mr. Patrick Thomas is with us. He is an Arkansas businessman. Patrick, welcome to Conduit News.
Good morning, Paul. Glad to be here, and thanks for talking about this subject on the air today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely want to get to the internet sales tax and your thoughts on that, because I know you've got really good stuff on that. But tell us, you're based out of Jacksonville, is that correct? And tell us kind of your experience, what has led you to this point in terms of business.
Well, Paul, the idea of sales tax would be, in my opinion, to support my community, my family, and figuratively speaking, the fire truck that my city invested in. And when the state of Arkansas says I have to collect sales tax for Hot Springs County, let's say, I have a problem with that. And now today the state of Arkansas is willing to put the burden on similar entrepreneurs who are up and coming, if you will, considering the downfall of the small business guy with various big box stores shutting down various businesses across America. We're making a comeback, but yet here comes now our federal government, or our state governments, if you will, and the Supreme Court and their ruling. All of this that we're talking about here in the last few weeks is going to do nothing but harm the small business guy trying to make that comeback. I can't imagine asking somebody in a place that I always refer to as Timbuktu, Idaho, working for the state of Arkansas to collect sales tax for us here in Arkansas. So it's just a burden, and I'm against it strongly.
So do you not buy the arguments that the state, one of their arguments is that this is for your brick and mortar Main Street businesses? You reject that?
I reject that 100%. I keep hearing this argument that it's going to levelize the playing field. The majority of the honest folks out there, they're not buying on the internet to avoid paying sales tax. They're paying shipping and handling charges, which many times is far greater than that sales tax amount. So if my argument with a competing brick and mortar store is I have to charge that shipping and handling charge, and you're accusing me of having customers that want to avoid paying sales tax. I don't think that's a valid argument. It's not levelizing the playing field. We as internet e-commerce business marketeers, we operate with efficiency. We don't have to provide the creature comfort, if you will, because we use warehouses that are either remotely operated or in a lot of cases not even heated and cooled. But whenever that brick and mortar has a storefront, he has to heat and cool that space. So we can operate much more efficiently. So the levelizing a playing field has nothing to do with sales tax. It's all about efficiency.
And so essentially this is just going to make things more expensive. I mean, you guys are going to pass this on to the consumer, right?
Well, not really. We still have a lot of margin remaining. We can absorb the costs. Where I'm seeing a blunder by the government is some states are going to charge origin-based tax. A lot of people haven't heard that lately, but California and about 10 other states, they are origin-based. And now the state of Arkansas, let's say, if they implement the same things that South Dakota is wanting to do, they're going to want to charge a use tax because now you and I have bought from California. California's going to collect their sales tax, and the state of Arkansas wants California now to collect and remit the use tax for us. Let's just say California is 10% and we're 10% here in the state of Arkansas. That's 20%. Us in Arkansas are going to stop buying from California. If anybody wants to try to control this thing and shut down the internet market, it might be that they want to just have everybody go to an origin-based tax, and we just take care of our own and encourage the economy in our local communities.
Well, so I mean, this is about more money for governments. I mean, that's what they're after. They're definitely after the revenue. And what I would just say, unless what you described happens, I think people are going to continue to shop on the internet, even if, let's say, there is somebody somewhere that does pass on the tax to the consumer, and you do pay more for your internet shopping. I don't think that means people are necessarily going to say, oh, I paid a little bit more, so now I'm going to go to mom and pop store on Main Street instead of go to Amazon or wherever else. Because the internet is so convenient, people are going to still shop there. And so this doesn't save your brick and mortar businesses that are trying to sell products that people no longer want to touch and feel before they buy them. Those are still going to continue to go out of business. I just want to point that out, that it's a lame attempt to deceive the public to say that we've got, to level the playing field for Main Street businesses. Main Street businesses are going to continue to go out of business because of the internet. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
That's right. That is today's, whether you want to call it mechanization or technology, it's the trend of the day to sell your wares on the internet. Even Sears discovered it back in the day, selling his pocket watches. Today the internet is the Sears and Roebuck catalog, if you will. And if people don't keep up with the technology and the changes, if you don't figure out how to sell your wares on the internet, then you're going to go out of business because you didn't keep up with the times. And having read the Supreme Court's decision yesterday, it's 40 pages of painful stuff. And the one thing that popped up in there was that this was obviously has something to do with Amazon and Walmart and one not liking the other. So the powers of some box stores to complain about Amazon, those powers are, and that muscle, if you will, is obviously there, and they're using the courts and the lawyers to try to fight off the competition. Who's going to get hurt is the small guy.
Yeah, and not to mention, we really have a fun. If states move forward with this and they pass their own tax laws and they expect out-of-staters to comply, what we essentially have here is taxation without representation. I mean that's a fundamental deviation from American philosophy, really. Well,
right here in the state of Arkansas, there's 75 counties that I have to be knowledgeable of. I have to maintain records for, and if there's 3 cents due some county here in Arkansas, I have to keep record of it, and I have to remit that and document it. 75 counties, not to mention the countless zip codes. And I don't even want to get into the whether or not that zip code is in a city limits or not. But in the United States of America, if you'll go do the searching, there's 3,007 counties. Now, some are saying, oh, no, there's software out there and there's companies that are going to spring up to take care of all that for you. That is still something that is a distraction from my primary purpose in my life for my family, and that is to make money. If I now am going to work for these states and having to even use free software that they're going to provide, that is still an activity. It's a task that I have to take time out of my day to do.
Yeah. That's going to be immense. So, Pat, we're talking with Patrick Thomas. So, you sell things online. This is why you are, following this so closely. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have?
I changed my business model to survive 2008.
Okay. So, tell us about that. Tell us that story. Walk us through that.
Well, in 2008, when the housing market crashed, people began to buy only what they need. Now, I just happen to be in a market where I sell outdoor power equipment parts. You need to mow your grass, so you need to fix your lawnmower. Maybe you have a power outage. You have a generator. You need power, and you need to fix your generator. I have come to realize that because of the downturn of the economy, more people are buying what they need, and today they're fixing what they've got already instead of buying new. So I ceased to sell whole goods, and I moved over into the parts sector, and now we sell globally. What's next? Is Europe going to be told to collect sales tax for the state of Arkansas because I sell and ship to Europe, Australia, the Caribbean? Where does it end?
You're exactly right. I mean, they're certainly trying to. I mean, the technology essentially has gone around the government elites, and they're trying their best to get back control of this thing. They're not only trying to get control of the revenue, Patrick, they're trying to get control of the information. That's a separate thing. The free flow of information is also damaging their control and what they're trying to do to manipulate the populations across the planet. Patrick, can you give us the website if people want to go there? We're going to put it up on the screen. If you can give us the website of where you buy, where people can buy.
Our website is simply ArkansasOPE.com, and there's a dash in between Arkansas and OPE, but OPE stands for Outdoor Power Equipment. But you can Google us on the web, and all sorts of information will pop up. But we're out there, been in business. I've been running e-commerce platforms since 1992 and selling other products and building websites. And when I started this business some 19 years ago, I knew that this was going to be the future. And even when Amazon decided to get in the business, I just took a jab at Amazon by opening up a bookstore. And it's kind of just a little thing between me and Amazon. You're going to get in my business, I'm going to get in your business. But I soon moved on and realized Amazon really can't even hurt me. For what I do here in the state of Arkansas in the Jacksonville community, I make a pretty good living for me and my family and the people I employ. Mm-hmm. So remaining small is still good for me, and this whole 200 invoices and $100,000 in sales, I can play their game. I can cut off at 200 invoices if I want to, or under 200 invoices. There's a lot of logistics and questions still yet to be answered about those numbers that states are going to set, but it's ultimately going to hurt the small business guy, and I think that is, if you want to call it a conspiracy by the big guys to hurt the small guy, call it what you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are conspiracies all the time. I mean, that's really what government is. Is they conspire to get their language out there that sounds good, but this is really what the end is, and it's something different. It's a look over here mentality. We've got your website up right now on our website, and again, it's arkansas-ope.com. That's arkansas-ope.com. It's Arkansas Outdoors. It's really neat that you're able to do this. But I want to go back to what you just said. If, like, for South Dakota, their law was if you do more than 200 invoices in a year or you do over $100,000 in business, we want you to comply with this. And you're saying essentially that if you have to, you'll just stop doing business at that threshold to keep from complying. And I'm just pointing out, I mean, what's that going to do if everybody does that? What does that do to our productivity? What does that do to our economy? And what you're saying here, Patrick, goes against all of the arguments that the government elites that want more of our money say.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I don't have to have $101,000 out of South Dakota. I can just move on and expand other markets. Remember now, I do business with the globe. If I have to, I can just shut off the entire state of Arkansas. I can shut off the United States. I can just ship internationally. It's easy to set aside the hassles, if you will, of doing business. And again, there's some out there who might be hearing this today saying, "Oh, you're fretting over nothing because there's systems out there that's going to be in place." Again, it might be a retaliatory attitude, but if they want to put a burden upon the small business guy, we can play that game too.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You are exactly right on that.
We're a force to be reckoned with today, and and you can put the government in that bucket. You can put the big box stores in that bucket. They don't like it because we figured out how to beat them. In theory, the internet process of buying is infinite. The box is a finite container, and they can only put so much in there. And I could in theory outdo. I could do just what Amazon is doing. Amazon is using third-party sellers, and that makes them infinite. The Walmart mentality, if you will. They've only got a certain amount of distribution centers. If they don't figure out how to compete with Amazon, they're gonna lose out. I think that's where they're at right now, and they don't like it.
Patrick Thomas, Arkansas businessman. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you taking risk, and I appreciate you providing products that people want that make their lives better, and that's what capitalism is all about. And I wish the government would understand that. And I really appreciate you coming on today, sir.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
All righty. Thank you. Patrick Thomas, everybody. Again, that website, arkansas-ope.com. Go there now. It's a great Arkansas business. We're going to be right back with Mr. Tim Jacob from Arkansas Term Limits. And don't go anywhere.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From the Nata Rhino collection, the fragrance of backroom deals, nepotism, the aroma of higher taxes, subliminal deception, deep state, made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender Nothing says aristocrat like essence of bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, so we are in the final push here to get the number of signatures that are needed to get the term limits amendment on the ballot that we'll all vote on this November. And if you want a term limit petition, and it can be in your hands within 24 hours, the number to call is 501-590-8260. That's 501-590-8260. Checking in with the program once again, we have Mr. Tim Jacob with ArkansasTermLimits.org. Tim, welcome back, sir.
Good morning, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I would like to ask you, because I'm watching on Facebook, and I was talking earlier, it is no surprise that we have politicians that I actually agree with sometimes on their voting record, but we have politicians who are in office who are not for the term limits, and I don't really want to spend much time on it because, it's really just not a shock. I mean, this is the disconnect between the people, and this is why we need term limits in many ways, but there are some saying that, this idea that Arkansas, has term limits that are, too big is wrong, and that we have actually one of the most restrictive term limits in the nation. And I wanted to get your response to that.
16 years in the same office is the longest tenure any term limits established in this country. So that's a no-brainer. Listen, I'm kind of glad these politicians for the first time are coming out and wanting to debate this issue. Where were they in 2014 when they used a campaign of silence and a deceptive ballot title to get their way? I'm relishing and look forward to any debate. Let's talk about this issue. That's what democracy, that's what our elections are all about. We don't need to deceive voters anymore like they did in 2014. We want to put this fraud that they did in 2014 to the test this year. We want to give the Arkansas voters an honest ballot title, and that's why we're in this, to put it on the ballot and to give the voters of Arkansas a chance.
And I'm really glad that you said that, and you're talking about the deception that got us to this point. And, of course, John Woods is now convicted. He's a convicted felon. It's no surprise if he was willing to deceive the people to raise legislators' pay and double their term limits, that he also would be laundering money through a Christian college and taking kickbacks. So this is actually symbolic in a lot of ways to get rid of the stain of John Woods on the entire state of Arkansas, in my opinion. And I think and not to mention, there is a culture of corruption down there right now, and I think these term limits would really help address some of that. You can't stay in office forever. You got to go back home.
That's exactly right. John Woods was judged by a jury of his peers, and most of the frauds that he's perpetrated are going to be rescinded. But there's one out there still, and that's the tripling of their terms that they did in 2014, and that's what the voters have got to rescind this November, and that's why we want everyone to call 501-590-8260. You need a petition. You have friends and family that could sign. Please, let's get this done. Let's get on the ballot and give the voters of Arkansas a chance again.
Do we have anybody out collecting signatures today?
We do, but they're mobile. They're not going to be at one location today. They probably will be tomorrow.
Okay.
But they're just mobile out there, and we're just trying to get as many petitions in the mail or deliver them personally to anybody who calls in. And you can text that number, 590-8260. You can text it, you can call, and we will get petitions to you.
Yeah.
If you've never participated in a political campaign before, in any type of effort, this is something you can do.
You know, it's interesting. We had you on the program yesterday, Tim, and we were, talking about how the Marble Palace is not going to be for this. I mean, once you get the number of signatures, they're going to do everything they can to throw as many as they can out. That's why we got to have these signatures. And, almost like clockwork, here, all of a sudden, here comes a lot of criticism on social media, from people who are in office. And I just got to tell you, at this point, I think we're right over the target. And I think, like you said, the people want term limits, and if you get it on the ballot, there's a great chance it's going to pass, and they're trying to stop it. And I'm right there with you, Tim. I think this is a great idea. Folks, the number is 501-590-8260. You can text it. You just heard, you can text that number, 501-590-8260, and sign the petition to get term limits back on the ballot, and let's undo the damage and the wound that Arkansas experienced from the last ballot title on this, which was deceptive, doubled their terms, more than doubled their terms, allowed them to increase their pay, and let's get rid of this stain of John Woods on the entire state. Hey, Tim Jacob, I appreciate it, sir, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.
We appreciate you, Paul. Thanks so much.
Tim Jacob, everybody. You can also print off your own petition and sign it and get your family and friends to sign it. ArkansasTermLimits.org. That's ArkansasTermLimits.org. You need to be a registered voter to sign. That's ArkansasTermLimits.org. Again, the number 501-590-8260. Folks, we're trying to expose corruption. We need to cap corruption. And one of the ways is to not let these guys stay in office so long. It's common sense, right? We'll see you tomorrow.